Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a bizarre, absolutely fascinating premise. What if literally everything in the universe is the exact same thing? We're going to unpack a sprawling, highly detailed framework of reality that challenges the very nature of existence, identity, and human evolution.
So, what if every single person, planet, and event is actually just one entity? Well, to figure that out, we've got to look at the massive and, honestly, pretty strange cosmology laid out in a 1984 text called The Raw Material. Whether you approach it as literal truth, a psychological phenomenon, or just wild science fiction, its central premise is incredibly thought-provoking. It's the idea that the entire universe is a single, conscious entity, experiencing itself in infinite ways. Our focus today is to understand exactly what this law of one really is.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with contacting Ra, define the law itself, look at the primal distortions, climb the densities of evolution, and finally, weigh the paths of service to self versus others. Let's get into it.
Section 1. Contacting the entity Ra, the Lel research transcripts. Now, the authors didn't actually write this philosophy in the traditional sense. They claimed to channel it. The source material is formatted entirely as a Q&A transcript. The researchers behind it, physics professor Don Elkins and his associate Carla Rueckert, spent nearly 2 decades running paranormal and telepathic experiments. They started way back in 1962, but it wasn't until 1981 that they achieved what they called a precise tuning. That's when they supposedly made direct trans-telepathic contact with an intelligence that gave them the wildly detailed answers published in 1984. The entity on the other end of the line, it called itself Ra, but we're not talking about a single alien in a spaceship here. The text describes Ra as a sixth-density social memory complex. Basically, imagine an entire civilization of beings that have evolved and completely merged their consciousness into one unified identity. They even claim to have visited Earth around 11,000 years ago during the Egyptian era to teach this exact stuff, though apparently we humans kind of distorted the message pretty quickly. So how does Ra even exist relative to us? In the book's introduction, Don Elkins uses this brilliant TV channel analogy. The text explains that different dimensions, or densities, all mutually coexist in the exact same physical space. It's literally like different channels broadcasting simultaneously on the same TV set. We're just tuned into one specific channel right now, completely oblivious to all the other frequencies and entities hanging out right here in our physical space. Moving on to Section 2, defining the law, the ultimate unity. All right, so what exactly is the law of one? Once we understand the source, we've got to look at the message. According to Ra, there is zero separation in the universe, none at all. This definition is absolute. Everything is simply a unified, infinite creator experiencing itself. Stuff we perceive as totally separate, like different people, objects, or opposing forces like right and wrong, are ultimately illusions. At the highest level of reality, there's no polarity, there's no disharmony, there's only one singular identity. There's this incredibly poetic quote from the transcripts: "You are everything, every being, every emotion, every event, every situation. You are unity. You are infinity. You are love/light, light/love. You are." This really hammers home the point, doesn't it? You're not just a tiny part of the universe. According to the law of one, you are the entire universe, just hanging out in a temporarily distorted, individualized form. Every person you interact with, every emotion you feel, it's all the exact same infinite creator. Which brings us to Section 3, the primal distortions, from unity to multiplicity.
But wait, if everything is basically one giant unity, why is daily life so incredibly messy, divided, and physical? The text explains this using sequential distortions. And distortion here doesn't mean something is broken, it just means a modification from pure unity so the creator can try out manyness. It kicks off with the first distortion, free will, or the law of confusion. This allows for choice and the illusion of separation. Free will then sparks the second distortion, love, which is the great creative principle. And love focuses energy to manifest the third distortion, light, which literally builds the physical matter and energy of the universe as we see it.
Section 4, densities of evolution, the cosmic ladder.
Let's see how this builds into an actual framework for existence. In this system, evolution isn't just physical. It's the evolution of consciousness across 8 densities. First density is elemental, water, fire, air, earth, stuff with just basic awareness. Second density brings in plants and animals, characterized by growth and movement. And then there's us. Our physical world sits in the third density. This phase is built specifically for human self-awareness, and more importantly, it's a brief, intense pressure cooker designed for us to make one crucial moral choice.
Once you make that choice, spiritual evolution keeps climbing upward. Fourth density is all about love and understanding. Fifth density brings light and wisdom. Hit the sixth density, and love and wisdom perfectly balance into true unity. This is actually the social memory complex level that Ra supposedly speaks from. Eventually, everything merges back into the grand mystery of the eighth density, completing an entire cosmic octave. So where does that leave us right now? Ra notes that the third density master cycle on Earth takes exactly 75,000 years. And according to the text, we're hitting the end of that cycle right about now. It culminates in a cosmic harvest. Think of it like a graduation. Eligible souls who have polarized their consciousness enough get to graduate to the next TV channel, the fourth density, while everyone else repeats the third density cycles somewhere else. This perfectly segues into Section 5, Service, the dual paths to graduation. So here's the million-dollar question. How does a soul actually polarize enough to graduate or harvest from our current density? What is this big choice we're supposed to make? Well, Ra outlines that the law of one blinks at neither the light nor the darkness. Since everything is the creator, both positive and negative are simply valid experiences of the creator. So, the text gives you two perfectly valid paths to spiritual evolution: service to others and service to self. You just have to pick one. The material lays out these two paths totally objectively. The positive path, service to others, is built on harmony, pure love, and aiming to serve everyone. The negative path, service to self, relies on control, manipulation, and elevating an elite group over everybody else. What's absolutely fascinating here is that under the law of free will, both of these paths generate enough spiritual friction, or polarization, to launch a soul into the next density.
Interestingly, this battle of polarities isn't just a fun philosophical exercise, it's surprisingly technical. Ra states that extraterrestrial groups respond to planets using literal mathematical equations based on free will. They even use a statistical formula resulting in roughly 1012. This number mathematically calculates a planet's collective calling or need for aid, balancing out a planetary quarantine against free will. It just goes to show how incredibly analytical this whole cosmology really is.
And that brings us to this incredibly profound quote from the text. To serve yourself and to serve others is a dual method of saying the same thing if you can understand the essence of the law of one. This is arguably the most challenging psychological piece of the whole puzzle. Because if there is only one being in the universe, serving someone else is literally serving yourself, and serving yourself is serving another part of the Creator. True unity means accepting that even the deepest darkness, the path of manipulation and control, is ultimately just another temporary expression of the exact same infinite identity. Let's wrap up with some key takeaways from this explainer. Whether you see the raw material as literal metaphysical truth or just top-tier philosophical fiction, it gives us a highly structured way to look at reality. It posits that existence is a single, unified entity operating like coexisting TV channels. We're evolving through multiple densities of consciousness, and our current third density requires us to make a definitive choice between serving others or serving self. And wild as it sounds, both positive and negative paths eventually lead right back to the infinite creator.
And that leaves us with a pretty provocative final thought. If the law of one is actually real, and absolutely every person you meet, every frustrating situation, and every moment of joy is simply another version of you experiencing itself, how does that fundamentally change the way you'll treat yourself today?